speaker cards. And you are allowed, just to remind you, you're allowed
to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
actually under number 3, the second page.
I'm so sorry. I've been reminded that we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm sorry I don't have my flag here. So
It's right
Oh.
here in the corner.
can you grab it for me? And I'll
Yes,
put it on
ma'am.
If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Here we go. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All board members, let the record show that all board members are present in attendance, as is our superintendent, Dr. De Leon. We'll move on to public comment. Oh, where am I looking
Okay,
at
you
my
gotta
agenda?
go to number 3 on it. That's open session.
Okay,
There you go.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Nope.
We are just leaving closed session. There was report of action there. There was no action taken in closed session, and I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I didn't hear who it was moved by. Moved by Mrs. Reuter and seconded by Mrs. Merkley. By a raise of hands. Oh, I think I need to do a roll call for this. Mrs. Reuter,
Aye.
Mrs. Merkley,
Aye.
Mr. Ellenson,
Aye.
Dr. Fernando.
Aye.
And my vote is aye as well. So we have a majority.
Do you want to ask for a sound check?
Could we do a quick sound check? Because I'm not sure that we can hear when other people speak. Can everybody hear everybody else though? Okay, all right.
Okay, because
I could not hear.
you know what? We turned
anybody.
our
Ah,
stuff down earlier.
That's what mine up, so I don't want to. Got it.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll get this all worked out before the end of the meeting. Now I'm going to go to public comment.
We have a discussion item at 8361. We do need to
Oh,
approve. the
good
revisions.
grief. All right. A discussion action item. Who am I calling on to? Dr. De Leon?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, trustees board. In this action item, we are asking the board to approve the provisions of AB 361, which is the governor's extension of our ability to hold virtual meetings and also teleconference. And those were attached in all of the board documents that were posted on Friday.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A second?
Second.
Discussion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm going to roll call the vote again then. Mrs. Merkley,
Aye.
Dr. Fernando,
Aye.
Mr. Ellenson,
Aye.
Mrs. Reuter.
Aye.
My vote is aye as well. It's unanimous. Thank
Good
you,
job.
Dr. De Leon,
You did it.
for keeping me in line. Okay, now we are going to go to public comment, and I have 6 speaker cards. And just to remind you all that the limit is 3 minutes, and we do have a timer, I believe, that is going up as well. So we're going to unmute Mrs. Judy Nelson.
Is Kelly showing the timer?
And Kellen, could you please show the timer for us? He's getting it put up. Thank you.
Who is after Mrs. Nelson, please?
And the person to be ready after Mrs. Nelson is Nick Lacy.
Go ahead and unmute Ms. Nelson and then begin her timer. There we go. I think
Mrs. Nelson, I believe you're unmuted if you want to begin.
Okay,
There we go.
just a sec.
Hit the clock, please.
Okay. Here I go. As many of us know and have mentioned in public comments in previous meetings, we are still patiently waiting for the critical race theory curriculum study session that board member Reuter requested during the August 23rd board meeting. She described a study session as a less formal setting, allowing for members of the public and the board to engage in conversation about the subject rather than the formal setting of a regular school board meeting. Her request was a response to the numerous members of the public who spoke about concerns that CRT is in fact in the GUSD curriculum, even though we have been repeatedly told that it isn't. Member Reuter's request was applauded by many in the audience and those watching virtually at home that night, but we've been waiting now for almost 4 months for it to be scheduled. I was told a few weeks ago that tonight's meeting would be the CRT study session, but when it was announced, I was dismayed to find out that it's a workshop for the board, not for the public, on AB 101. The board recently signed by the bill recently signed by the governor that requires all high school students to take an ethnic studies class before they can graduate. That certainly is not at all what board member Reuter requested and what we asked for. I'm asking you again tonight to schedule a CRT curriculum study session. CRT is a complex subject and I want to hear what it means to the board and the staff of Glendora Unified. Equity is now included in the curriculum and social emotional learning will soon be for all grades in the district. Those approaches to teaching are considered by many to be components of critical race theory, as is also ethnic studies. It appears that you will not hold the requested study session because you know that you cannot truthfully say that CRT is not taught to our children. It's disappointing that you refuse to be transparent about this extremely important subject. It's also disappointing that you're only taking public comment before tonight's ethnic studies presentation. Your agenda states that you welcome public comment, but your actions say that you don't. I ask you to reconsider and reopen public comment at the end of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Nelson. Next speaker is Nick Lacy. And after Nick would be Sabrina Cosmas.
Great, thank you. And good evening to each of you. I have 3 questions for the board tonight. Why are we doing a study session on ethnic studies? What is the outcome and what is the goal and how does that answer the specific concerns that this community has brought to your attention? See, for all those on the call tonight, we need to zoom out a bit here and see a broader context as to why that question really is so relevant. A few months ago, the board said publicly that there would be a study session on CRT. And since that time, there was some silence, there was some delay, but there was also some dialogue. And I understand that tonight is considered that session, but is it? See, a staff presentation on curriculum is far different than an in-depth dialogue in pursuit of a resolve to an ideology that has disrupted this nation and its schools. Or if tonight is the CRT session, then is this an admission by the board that there could possibly be some potential overlap in the ideology and teachings of CRT and ethnic studies? The people of Glendora deserve a clear answer on that. Question 2, why will the board not engage in the topic of CRT and take a vote? You have stated that there will not be a vote nor a discussion. And furthermore, you have said the petition signed by over 1,500 people really means nothing. And yet somehow a presentation by one staff member carries more voice than 1,500 citizens. You have been provided with examples and templates and key terms and solutions and more, all in good faith in the hopes of contributing to some study session on CRT. And yet here we are listening to a presentation on ethnic studies. Third question, what evidence should we expect to see that proves the board is listening and not simply appeasing, making the public feel like they have a voice, then moving on with a previously set agenda? This is a hard question. It's a fair question, because if you reject petitions, if you won't have public dialogue and you won't vote, then what evidence can you show that public opinion matters? Let's be honest, does it? This session is not the session that we were promised, but we'll make the most of it. So in summary, here are the 3 questions once again. Why are we doing a study session on ethnic studies and not CRT as told by the board? Number 2, why will the board not engage the topic of CRT and take a vote? And number 3, what evidence should the public expect to see that proves our voice matters? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Sabrina Cosmas, and after Sabrina would be David Kenny.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Cosmas. I am a Glendora High School alumni with family members currently in the district and a member of the community. Since the board has decided not to utilize the study session to address CRT and is holding on to the presentation after public comment, I'm going to address my current quick thoughts on the matter. So CRT is a dangerous ideology that has now reached our district under the guise of ethnic studies. It is an academic theory that integrates the role of race in today's society and divides citizens between the oppressor versus the oppressed based on ethnic background. Be warned that if we allow this curriculum into our schools, it will not only diminish the objective nature of academia, but it will divide teachers, staff, and worst of all, the students at play. We have seen countless examples over this past year of how ethnic studies has divided staff and students. In Cupertino, 3rd graders were required to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and rank themselves according to their power and privilege in the name of ethnic studies. San Diego Unified held a white privilege training in which they told the group that they were racist and upheld racist ideas simply based off the color of their skin. My cousins attend one of the elementary schools within the district. They are half Hispanic and half Asian, and I don't want them to be graded or treated differently than any of their peers just because of this enhanced focus on their race caused by this ethnic studies course. You can call me old school, but I want them to be graded on their academic performance and treated fairly based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. The effects of teaching students to treat each other differently and see society through the lens of race will not only impact their ability to perform academically, but it will cause emotional and social damage that may never be undone. Thank you, and I hope that the board will reconsider leaving public comment to just the beginning and keeping this open till after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cosmas. Mr. Kenny, and following Mr. Kenny is Linda Gelris.
Thank you, members of the board, Superintendent De Leon. Nice to be here. My name is David Kenny. I grew up in Glendora, went to Roosevelt, went to Goddard, went to Sandburg, went to Glendora High School, on to Citrus College, then to USC, then to Pepperdine Law School. I've been representing school districts for about 30 odd years. And I see that you have ethnic studies on your agenda this evening. I know that the governor has mandated. I would just like to raise some cautions. In 2014, ethnic studies was introduced at the El Rancho Unified School District. It was followed shortly thereafter by the board being seized by a group of communists. And then after about a year and a half, they were all booted out, just for, not all of them, but most of them were booted out, just for your information. In 2015, ethnic studies was introduced at Montebello Unified. Following that, they had, El Rancho had a $200 million bond. Montebello introduced ethnic studies. Following that, they had a $300 million bond. That's been in litigation and with the Securities and Exchange Commission. During the period between 2016 and 2020, there were approximately 60 school districts in the state of California and 30 counties that approved school bonds totaling literally billions of dollars. Among those in the San Gabriel Valley were Bassett, Citrus, Pasadena, Los Angeles at 7 billion. Duarte, I believe I said, I'm sorry, I lost my notes because of the screen. Whittier Union and Pasadena at $500 million. But these are all of these school bonds follow the introduction of ethnic studies into the curriculum. Ethnic studies opens the door for CRT. And I think it's very important that the citizens of Glendora understand that. And I think it's very important that the school board of Glendora understand that. You're opening a door, letting in the Third World Liberation Army that comes out of the 1960s up at San Francisco State University, which is touted in the literature. It's nothing but one thing, and you have to remember this. It is all based on one fundamental principle: by any means necessary. And that is not the American way. So I'm going to caution the board to be very careful with ethnic studies and to understand that it is the door through which critical race theory enters the curriculum, enters the hearts and minds, and you lose children that way on a daily basis. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Mrs., I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Gelris, and then Mr. Jean Lopez.
My name is Linda Galeris. Should I press the blue button when I'm ready? Okay. My mother is a refugee from a foreign country where 12 of her family members were executed. They were the wrong ethnicity. At the age of 17, having escaped the horrors of war and given the opportunity to live in America, she worked hard, learned English, and met my father while working as a hostess during the night shift. During my junior year of during high school, my family lived in Puerto Rico. I embraced the language, culture, and people so much that I minored in Spanish and eventually taught Spanish at the high school level. In my classes, I made a point to teach my students to put themselves in others' shoes and not to judge others based on their ethnicity. There are too many examples to list, but one time, certain students were making fun of others. Suddenly, we had a fire drill and everyone had to walk outside to the football field. One student was recounting her family's journey to America after great turmoil in her country. It was traumatic. Her family spent time living in a refugee camp. Her father and her brother died there. Our whole class listened to every word with tears in our eyes, and sharing her tragic experiences, she offered us all a glimpse of another world, her world. My son was not a good student. My husband and I struggled to find ways to motivate him. Nothing worked. On our 25th anniversary, we took a trip and had a great conversation on the airplane with a Chinese man who did not speak Chinese. He said it hindered him when he traveled for business. Immediately, a light bulb went off in our heads and we decided that our 15-year-old son should learn to speak Chinese. He did it, and he has a perfect accent too. We sent him to China for 2 months during college for language immersion and to grow up, I suppose. He was 19 years old in a foreign country all alone. Thinking about it reminds me of my mom at his age. My son eventually married an immigrant. She moved to this country in her late teens, like my mother. She is not a citizen yet, but as soon as she is eligible, she will pursue citizenship. My best friend is an immigrant. We've been friends for 36 years. We have different ethnic and religious backgrounds. We have tried and failed to articulate our mysterious bond. We marvel at all the coincidences that brought us together and at the depth of our mutual love that we both feel for one another. I have a master's degree. If I told you some of the theories that I needed to master in my research papers and for tests, you would think I was joking. There is so much nonsense in the academic world. The problem is some of these theories get taught to young children. Whatever we're naming it this week, CRT, ethnic studies, or whatever, it's another way to resegregate people into groups. Wherever it has been done, this has ended tragically with people killing each other. The truth is no one chose their nationality or their skin color. Every person is responsible for his actions and attitudes. It's wonderful to see that skin color no longer determines one's circumstances or ability to thrive in our society of immigrants. All children should be taught to value love, truth, hope, unity, and acceptance, and to reject lies, hatred, despair, and division. Somebody is making money from the selling of CRT curricula. What good does it do for people to make money off of hatred and division and lose their soul?
Thank you, Mrs. Gelris. Our last speaker tonight, Dr. Lopez, or Mr. Lopez, I'm sorry, Mr. Jean Lopez.
Unmute.
How is that? Did you not hear anything I just said?
We
No.
did not. Please start over.
Okay, well, I was happy that I was being acknowledged as a doctor, and of course
Yeah.
I am not.
Sorry about that.
I am not, but my name is Gene Lopez. My wife and I have two daughters at Glendora High School, Catalina and Carly. And I was saying that I really align myself with the previous speakers, and I applaud their comments. And I don't have a 3-minute prepared talk, but I'll do my best to get this done in the next 2.5 minutes. And so while I applaud those and Councilwoman Nelson, I do have to say that there have been some outreach by the board and looking at creating a community committee on ethnic studies, and that can be worrisome, but it is a law. I mean, it's Assembly Bill 101 that was adopted earlier this year, and nowhere, and I would cautiously, nowhere does it say that we have to adopt the critical race theory curriculum, but we do have to create a ethnic studies curriculum, and within this ethnic studies curriculum, it doesn't begin until the year 2025-26, and it also says commencing with pupils graduating in the year 2029-2030 school year. Students have to take this ethnic studies for 1 semester. And the Assembly Bill goes on to describe a lot of other things that we have to do to meet the requirements of ethnic studies. And so while it's several years away, I think the board is moving in the right track to work with the community. I think that we should absolutely not introduce CRT to our students, but I think there's some room for ethnic studies within our community. And with a community committee, I think we can reach mutual respect and mutual purpose when it comes to teaching our children. And I also would like to say to the school board that we've already created some goals through the LPAC earlier this year. And we probably ought to go revisit those goals, because nowhere does it say anything about ethnic studies. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda is the study session presentation. I will turn this over to Dr. De Leon.
Thank you, President Borg. I really appreciate it. We are thrilled to be able to present this study session tonight. This is a curricular study session. CRT will be addressed during the study session. It will be defined during the study session. We will talk about Glendora's approach to that and during the study session. So just because we didn't title the study session CRT doesn't mean it's not part of it, because really what we have to address is ethnic studies. It is a state mandate through AB 101. And what we're trying to do is involve the community in that, hence the development of a community committee. So at this time, since this is a curricular study session, I am very honored and privileged to hand it over to our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, who will be leading the curriculum study process throughout, and will be leading the study session tonight. Dr. Kelson.
Thank you, Dr. De Leon. Could I
thing, if everyone could please turn their cameras off, because what it does is it slows down the internet, and then we have problems throughout the meeting typically. You just put stop video at the bottom of your screen. We would really appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Dr. De Leon, and welcome esteemed community members, trustees, and colleagues here in the room. My name is Virginia Kelson. I am honored to serve as Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services here in Glendora Unified. My team, and I'm seeing I may need to do another mic check. Dr. Ferguson, I see you there. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you, sir. My team has been instrumental in preparing tonight's presentation, and we look forward to this being the beginning of a long conversation around the local implementation of the new state requirements. With that said, the handouts included in my comments or my presentation this evening, as well as the slides, will be posted on the Glendora Unified website by 4 p.m. tomorrow in a folder with today's date. We will go ahead and post also the slides from the presentation on the initial graduation requirement given at a previous board meeting. And that is in an attempt to be fully transparent and to continue to engage our community. Thank you to each of you who've made public comment this evening. And please know there will be many other opportunities to participate. Okay, I will be stopping as often as I can to enlist comments from the trustees and or questions representing our community. With that said, she can't advance the slide. Are we doing the next slide? With that said, we'll go ahead and I will speak to the preparation that we've done. Please understand our purpose this evening is to inform the community, including our trustees, on California's ethnic studies model curriculum standards to address some of the complex nature of perceptions in the national, state, and local forum. We share something in common. We share a commitment to the children of Glendora Unified. We share a love of learning, even when topics are difficult or controversial. We share a love for our country and a willingness to talk together, as I heard in a public comment this evening, to engage in a dialogue about where we hope to and plan to go. What is key as an outcome of this conversation is that we have allowances in the law to interpret AB 101 at the local level, both to represent the local history, especially specific to Indigenous populations, as well as serving the demographics of the local community. With that said, there is an important bit of history. Let me see. Okay, Kellen, are you going to be advancing slides? Thank you.
One more.
So one of the important things to remember as we go forward is a tradition in Glendora Unified and some past practices that are significant. And I would dare say in my 30th year in this field, that especially bullet one is a paramount aspect of how schools work best. And that is in a family's trust in their own children. Many of us in this meeting remember when we would arrive home and an adult or maybe even a sibling would say, "What did you do in school today?" And having the opportunity to share about what happened at school and how things went. I anticipate that our children and the adults around them will continue to do that sort of casual and very significant sharing of what is happening in classrooms across this district and on a larger scale as well. We have invested in through the staff here, our teachers over and over and over again are recognized for the trust that the greater community has in them and in their professionalism, as well as that of our counselors and administrators. Two paramount aspects of how to navigate this complex landscape well, avoiding whenever and wherever possible the division that some of the folks who've expressed concern about in public comment have offered. Thank you, as an awareness. Third is the accountability of relationships between students and the educators who serve them. Those relationships are paramount in the learning process, and they are built through time, through relational interaction, and through trust between the people at home, what happens in the classroom, and each individual involved. Finally, we must ensure that we engage as a district with the families and students we serve in order to continue to see to it that outstanding learning outcomes are brought about in Glendora Unified. I will pause if there are comments or questions from the trustees at this time.
I raise my hand. I don't know how it works. The other thing that I'd like to talk about, can you hear me?
Hang on, Mrs. Reuter, we can't hear.
I heard you just fine.
Thank you. I think in the room where they are, they turn their volume down to avoid the echo. So I just want to make sure that the presenter can hear me.
Okay.
Now?
There you go. Yes.
Okay, so the other thing that I want to talk about, and these bullet points, Dr. Kelson, thank you, are super important and relevant locally here in Glendora. But another thing that I wanted to ask about, because I kept seeing the acronym while I was reading through the curriculum, is the process that the curriculum took getting up to us and this Instructional Quality Commission. And if you might be able to explain what the job of the Quality Commission is to get, when you're talking about building trust and processes and things that have been in place for a long time. I think that this instructional, the IQC, if people see the acronym in paperwork, the Instructional Quality Commission is relevant. So would you mind telling everybody a little bit about the IQC and what their role is in this process?
Thank you for asking. I wouldn't mind at all. So essentially, the State Board of Education convened nearly a decade ago to look at some potential changes to the history social science framework, as well as some early results that were coming out of a study that was conducted in 2011. Not to mention some of the feedback that students in some school districts around the state and across the country were providing. And it's interesting to me that even 10 years ago, this was on the minds of the children who are served in our schools. So the Instructional Quality Commission, the State Board of Education, began considering what the adjustments to at the time, what were at the time, the existing state standards in history, social science, and also in English language arts. They did multiple, is putting it mildly, iterations of documents, the model curriculum standards, and considered countless, thousands, actually thousands of comments from citizens across the state of California. Prior to the adoption of AB 101 and this graduation requirement in March of this year, there was conversation back in 2016, 5 years ago, how time flies, about what the ethnic studies inclusion of, or the including of topics about ethnic studies, or bringing about parts of this curriculum that I'll talk about in more detail might look like. 5 years ago, it was a conversation simply mandating the consideration of bringing this content into the curriculum. And about 6 months ago, in March, the state has mandated this graduation requirement starting in the class of 2030. So the process that was modeled for us, I would dare say, by the state of California through the State Board of Education, through the legislature, is one that will be mirrored here in Glendora, in that feedback from the community, feedback from students, from teachers, from people on this call, I would imagine, whether part of a formal committee or through feedback provided in public comment at board meetings, through letters to our trustees or our superintendent. This is a feedback-based process that is very input-driven, similar to what I understand is what the Instructional Quality Commission has done. Other comments or questions from trustees? Okay. Next slide. So with that said, in addition to those, the significance of trust, of the accountability that is shared by students, families, and staff, there are some other important policies to note in terms of parent rights and responsibilities. They are contained in Board Policy 5020, and they will be, the trustees have a handout that details these that will be posted tomorrow. For anyone else on this call, rather than delaying by doing a screen share of the document, I will simply say that you will see a document that looks like this that is posted in the folder tomorrow. For this evening, if you were interested, you could go to the board policies posted on the district website and find Board Policy 5020 and the related administrative regulations. With that in mind, these regulations and policies are not new. They were adopted in 2013, and they are fairly consistent and aligned with the accountabilities of educators mandated in state law. These parent rights are in what we call shall language, not may or might. So these are mandates for us as partners with the families we serve. Among those mandates, I've highlighted here, parents have the right to meet with teachers, to build rapport and relationship. It is in those critical moments, if you will, where trust is decided upon, and it is my expectation built, because that trust is so significant between the educators who serve the children in this community and the families who entrust their children to us. The second important parent right is one of discernment. So we have modeled this year in terms of a survey that went out that was another statewide mandate, the California Healthy Kids Survey. We will model in the spring when we look at the California Healthy Youth Act and the curriculum there. that should a parent or other guardian want their child to be removed from a particular lesson with absolutely no penalty, the teacher and the site administrator are required to honor that request and to provide an alternative assignment for that student. Those accountabilities are paramount for how people can decide what is best for their own student. There are some additional items that are important to mention in terms of board policy that exists in the district. Next slide. And after this slide, trustees, I will pause again for comments or questions. We also have a number of board policies and administrative regulations in the district specific to graduation requirements. First, I thought it would be interesting to point out to our audience that the State Board of Education, through California Education Code, as listed there, determines what the high school graduation requirements are in the state of California. They set at the state level what I would call the floor of high school graduation requirements, the minimum. Most students in the state of California will want to go beyond that floor and aspire to attain a higher standard of preparation to include the meeting of the university admission requirements. We call those in common language the UC A to G requirements. They are mostly similar, but not entirely the same as what the California State University would require of a prospective student, as well as the requirements of many private colleges and universities around the state. Some of those requirements not only benefit students who are wishing to attend a four-year university, there are requirements that students can meet on our high school campuses that would transfer to the community college system. And no matter a student's post-secondary trajectory or plan, if you will, for their own adult goals and dreams, there are also ways for students to take courses here to prepare them to go right into a career or trade. With that said, the State Board of Education's role in defining the graduation requirements in two sections of board policy, you can see there where we have the courses of study clearly defined in 6143 and what our grad requirements currently are in 6146. We will, as the committees involved, and there will be 6, which I will talk about in a few slides, we will be considering and eventually proposing some changes to the graduation requirements in response to this legal mandate given in AB 101 and to any other mandates that could come down within the next 5 years, or I suppose 2 years. It's up to the state legislature to make those decisions and directions, give the direction to school districts. As always, our district staff and our community play a vital role in supporting students, in ensuring that they have access to a rigorous curriculum that will help them meet their goals and dreams. And that will continue to be represented through the work of the community committee. I will pause and take comments or questions from the trustees at this time on behalf of the community. Okay, hearing none, I'd like now to speak to policies specific to the selection of curriculum. You're starting to see as we go through this, just to recap briefly, long-standing policies and laws related to the rights and responsibilities of parents, how graduation requirements and courses of study are established at schools in California and in Glendora specifically, and also how curriculum is selected. It's important to note, as our team was preparing for this presentation, that in 1852, as part of an act in the Constitution, the state determined the responsibilities for selecting curriculum. And I wanted to point that out. It is reflected in current education code sections listed there. Those mandates, again, are not optional for any school district in the state. We are absolutely responsible to them, not only in terms of the community who elects the trustees, but also in terms of the accountabilities that educators have in ensuring that students are meeting the standards that they are assessed upon, not only in standardized testing, but also in their earning of grades and completing graduation requirements to advance to a future of their choosing. Locally, we have board policy and administrative regulations in section 6141. And it is important to note here that this is the first place in tonight's presentation where we see an alignment with Assembly Bill 101 and what our community committee and teacher and student committees will set out to do. Assembly Bill 101 allows school districts to make local decisions based on their population. In other words, we do not have a choice about whether or not we will implement this graduation requirement in the class, starting with the class of 2030. So we have to give them opportunities to do that during their high school career. However, we do have provisions in the law that allow the local community not only to represent its population, but also to honor specific local history. With that said, I would like now to direct the audience and anyone in the community. This will be posted tomorrow. You cannot yet find this on the website. This is a handout called, well, it's an excerpt from a book called Curriculum Foundations, Principles and Issues. I would like to address this with the community briefly this evening because I found it fascinating to revisit. It is a set of 10 considerations that educators must make, taken from 1976, about how to consider curriculum. And it holds us accountable to attaining the goals of the school district, the impact of technology, the attainment of the quote, good life. And that's when we think about what we want for our students as community members in the future, how we will ensure that all students have opportunities, what steps we can take to ensure the integrity of our political, economic, and military systems, what might we have to adjust in order to implement new curriculum? That is a very popular question. I will say in the minds of our teachers, you will often hear them say, I'm willing to do this. What might we take off of our plate? Because those folks work very, very hard on behalf of our students. And what honorable, this is a direct quote, what honorable compromises and solutions shall we make as we contemplate these questions? In preparing for this presentation this evening, the team honors that this is a complicated conversation. And it was reassuring to us to go back nearly 50 years to realize that some of the content of this evening's presentation is not new in terms of debates that have gone on in education for a long time. With that said, I will pause after this slide. I'd like to talk briefly about the role of teachers and staff in the selection of curriculum. If you would advance for us, please, Kellen. I realize there are many words on this slide. I'd just like to point out a few of them. As our committees work together, it is our obligation to look at what is really working, analyzing the effectiveness of the curriculum, align with California law, district policy, ensuring that students are achieving academically and engaging in learning. We must be responsible in implementing programs that are cost effective. We must ensure that our staff and our students have the resources to meet the accountabilities given to them, and that we review consistently the instructional materials and the implementation of the program itself to determine whether or not it is effective. That will come through generally in an educational system such as Glendora Unified through feedback from staff in trainings or in conversations as principals or district administrators walk around campuses to get feedback from our staff. There may come points in 5, 7, 10 years down the road when various community members want to talk about particular aspects of the curriculum. And that review process can and is part of longstanding practice here. So before we transition to policies related to the teaching of controversial issues, I'd like to pause and entertain comments or questions from the trustees representing our community.
Dr. Kelson, I just wanted to make sure that we understand the teachers will receive professional development for this, correct? They won't just be thrown in it. Will they be required to have a certificate in ethnic studies, or will their regular history teacher be able to teach this?
Thank you. So for now, we are in the very early stages of engaging our community. And I'd like to talk about some of the timing of this process because it's very unique based on the direction of the board. We would entertain teacher volunteers, meaning people who are interested in studying the model curriculum specific to ethnic studies, to join a committee and begin to talk about those, the model curriculum, if you will, and the implementation of it. At this time, there isn't a specific certificate in teaching ethnic studies. In school districts where the curriculum has been implemented, it is implemented in one of 3 ways. That is as an elective in either the history, social science, or English language arts high school curriculum. And I would anticipate, just because of the nature of teacher preparation and training in our state, that is likely to continue. There are additional opportunities that have been in existence since 2016 to the earliest knowledge I have, where teachers who were interested in learning more about the predicted school curriculum that we saw come about in 2021, we're probably beginning to prepare to learn about. So at this time, Trustee Merkley, nothing official for our teachers other than the announcement of opportunities to get involved for those who would like to do that. Welcome. Other comments or questions? Unmute.
How about now? I guess I just want to understand, so they might not need a credential per se, but is it sort of recommended towards any type of sort of specific, I mean, are we looking to have history teachers engage as far as this is concerned? Are we looking to pull our history teachers sort of out of history and start teaching ethnic studies classes? Is it, you know, there are options as far as, is it a standalone course versus integrated into regular already established courses that have to be reworked? But what's the target, or is it defined?
Thank you. Right now, it is undefined in the sense that we are out of the gate a bit early with a requirement that we would need to put in place to pilot a course probably in the fall of 2025 for full implementation to help our students meet that state mandated graduation requirement upon entry in high school in the class of, or in the fall of 26, by the time they graduate in 2030. I have talked with some teachers about this new mandate. However, our process is unique because we're engaging with the community first. In every other curriculum adoption that I have seen or been a part of, generally groups of teachers anticipate a change in a state framework and the adopted curriculum provided by the State Board of Education, and then The next phase is that teams of teachers get together, look at the framework, talk about how to approach it, and then the curriculum goes on view, usually through the form of textbooks, and the community would weigh in. That is an additional accountability provided for students and their families through state law. In this case, the reason I can't give you a more succinct plan for professional development of our teachers is because humbly, this board, in listening to our community, has directed us to engage with the community in an earlier part of this process out of respect to the feedback we've received and an acknowledgement to it. So that is the first part of this process. And I would anticipate realistically, it will probably be summer of 22 at the very earliest, to involve teams of teachers to get together to discuss this. Our teachers are doing a fabulous job welcoming students back after a year of many, many weeks and months of safer at home. There may be some who are interested in meeting prior to summer or next fall. However, at this time, I would anticipate that will be on like a second or third phase of this project.
So I just want to follow up with a comment about that. I had received an email from a community member expressing dismay that we also heard in the public comment regarding the interactive portion of this evening in this study session, and that I promised that I'd be listening very closely and trying to answer the questions or ask the questions throughout the course of the evening. And Mr. Lopez made the comment about this not being in our LCAP for this year, that he had participated in the LCAP committee and that the developing of the ethnic studies curriculum was not in that process, and that maybe we needed to revisit it. And I just want to say as a board member that we are starting with this right now, not because we're required to. We could wait a couple of years until it was actually time to start integrating into this curriculum required by the state as far as the dates are concerned. But we really do. We really have heard community members on both sides of this issue expressing interest of understanding more and getting the process started right now. And so while I appreciate that it's not on the LCAP, it really is a direct response to community members on both sides of the issue, wanting to get started, wanting to understand this being such an emotional topic for a lot of people, that we have started this process already.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have begun earmarking funds for the adoption of curriculum of textbooks, where the timing of the state frameworks require that of us. And when the district and the teachers are ready to spend time on that, we have made the adoption of curriculum a priority, specifically looking at returning to our next generation science standards adoption, which the district was in the middle of conducting right before schools were closed due to the pandemic. So we don't anticipate doing that right now. However, we are in need of finishing that process immediately. So probably summer, convening that group as well. Just as a related note, and thank you, Ms. Vakar, for that information. With that said, I'd like to go on and talk a bit about the teaching of controversial issues. And this is handout 3, trustees and community. And for those of you who are interested in seeing it this evening, you will find this in Gamut under board policies as well. It is board policy and the administrative regulations 6144. It's important to note this information because these policies were adopted in 2013. They were revised in 2017, and they provide accountability and assurances. Again, mandates in the verbiage shall, not in the verbiage may. So we must ensure that we are following these policies and the related laws. We must present topics in a balanced manner, addressing all sides of the issue without bias or prejudice and without promoting any particular point of view. That is guideline 2. We must ensure that students are given factual information. We must follow all state and federal laws, etc. I won't read all of these to you. However, I would suggest to our community that the topics of instruction must be relevant to the course of study as adopted, to the curricular goals to which students are held accountable and which are included in previous board policy related to courses of study and graduation requirements. And our educators must, and that includes everyone in administration, as well as our teachers, counselors, support staff, must exercise sound professional judgment. So briefly, we are also required to see to it that our students are, when participating in curriculum that can be seen as controversial, provided opportunities to develop their critical thinking skills, to learn to differentiate between fact and opinion, to show respect for others, and to demonstrate understanding and tolerance of different points of view. This is significant to mention because in the complex landscape that we are living in, I would dare say that some might wonder why take on content that can be perceived as controversial. And with these legal mandates, with the board policy, with the expectations of a well-rounded, educated citizen who engages in civic processes as an adult, perhaps these laws and policies suggest that one must consider additional points of view under the tutelage of a trained professional and with the accountabilities of the parents and guardians who send students to schools in order to formulate reasonable, objective opinions. Wanted to point this out as it is part of a conversation about what might be our approach as the various committees get together. So I will pause here after a brief discussion about the teaching of controversial topics, giving kind of closure to an overview of the history of policies and laws related to curriculum and bridging to some information about where we are today. And also trying to blend in some of the public comment content that we heard to open this meeting. So are there comments or questions from the trustees?
Dr. Kelson, I've had comments from the public asking how we would know what teachers were actually covering in class, and is there accountability for their presentations? Will to stick with the curriculum and not share personal. I don't want to say it, personal didn't come up, but I think we know what we're talking about.
Thank you for that question. The number one accountability that, and I'll speak from personal experience, just for the sake of example, the number one accountability that a teacher feels, that I felt, was that every student sitting in front of me would have full opportunity and
really could go home and tell their parent or guardian everything that happened in my class that day. And we teach, most of us, from the time we are taught to do the work that we do with that accountability in mind. I had a wise professor who once said, everything you say could be quoted on the front page of the newspaper with your picture directly below it. And that accountability is one.
Once more.
So in addition to that accountability, there is also the accountability of relationship. So if a parent or guardian went to a teacher and said, for example, when you get to this unit on this particular topic, whatever is controversial in the eyes of that particular family, the parent or guardian might say, could you please let me know when you're going to be talking about that? Because I'd like to talk with you about how that is perceived by my child. It could be something as simple as something from a family history that we may not know as educators, or it could be something as complicated in traditional school practices as some of the content in our health or biology classes related to human reproduction and any other thing. And it is an obligation of the teacher and the site administrator to set a time to talk with that family. What we've added in addition is learning platforms that give our families many opportunities to see what is happening in our curriculum through Canvas, through Google Classroom, lots and lots of technological advances that have added to that accountability. I think most of our teachers, dare I say all, but most, if not all of our teachers would absolutely be devastated if they felt that they had lost the trust of the adults who send students to school. So I think that accountability is important to us, that relationship is vital, and our staff will want to continue to maintain that. You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Other comments from or questions from our trustees?
I just have a short comment, because as I was looking through the curriculum, I was really impressed that they want to teach us the students how narratives are formed, who's telling the story, who or what they choose to highlight, and what they choose to leave out. And also they want to teach students how to identify and critically evaluate the dominant narratives they encounter in our daily lives. And I just think that's so important, because we read so many different sources, and we need to know who is telling the story from what perspective. And I just really was impressed with that.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Merkley. This is it's important to touch back to part of the opening introduction, which is every person that I have talked with about this, and there have been many, values the country they've chosen to call home, values this community, values the learning that our students do, and those narratives that you're mentioning in places where they are empowering and beneficial for all of us. And in some places historically where maybe they haven't been at times for some groups, it is our opportunity to consider those at the local level and figure out ways to keep our community together when, if that content becomes a part of any course that we currently teach. It can be as simple as something as who is chosen for a particular team in a physical education class, to as something as complex as what it is that happens when somebody is put on trial without representation and everything in between. So really wanting to ensure that we manage those difficulties in the narratives of a country with one very proud democratic narrative, while considering the experiences of some others in our history and in our current reality. With that said, I would like to go ahead and bring us to some information about the local population, because the content of AB 101 allows us to consider our local population. This is from the American Community Survey in 2019, The government is updating some of the data from the 2020 census, and we will continue to stay apprised of this. So this is citywide, and I realize there are 2 school districts represented in the city of Glendora. There are ways to pull the data apart for both, for a specific district, and we will be working on that for now. Nearly a quarter of the population of this city is under the age of 18. 47.9% of this city is white, 52.1% representing all other ethnic groups, 19.4% of which are foreign born. It's also important to note, as we talk about some of the terminology that we're going to talk about at the end of this presentation, that causes concern, that we have to, as people who serve children in an educational system, consider the economic trajectory of our population through educational attainment. That is our responsibility. And with that said, as of 2019, 91.47% of residents over the age of 25 have a high school diploma, and 37.4% of that same group of adults have a bachelor's degree or higher. In years to come, we anticipate following these data very closely, reporting out on them to the community, and measuring our progress in serving each individual in partnership with their family to see to it that our students have access to opportunities and advantages because they've attended Glendora Unified School District schools. We're well aware, and we've spoken briefly about the information on the next slide. I will pause after this for comments from the trustees. If you would advance it briefly, I've mentioned the mandate to create a model curriculum starting in 2016, following that instructional quality commission's work. I've also mentioned in a previous board meeting, as well as this evening, the portion of Assembly Bill 101, which mandates this graduation requirement. So any comments from the trustees before we briefly review the timeline that we're working with? And for those interested, posted in the folder on the website will also be a brief recap of the census data. It is publicly available on census.gov. For those who would like to search it this evening, you can look at the American Community Study or Educational Attainment in the city of Glendora, and you will find the statistics that are there listed in this handout. With that said, it's been mentioned a couple of times this evening, I will touch upon it briefly, that our process is early because we want to engage our community in this project. With that said, we will be working to pilot a course in the fall of 2025 and working with the community committee as well as teacher committees, student committees in order to do that work. We will also be accountable to making adjustments based on the reviews of the curriculum mentioned earlier this evening. With that said, if you would advance, how will this impact students in Glendora Unified? I thank the trustees for their comments on behalf of the community about this process. And historically, as I mentioned, teachers would normally get together, take a look at the expectations in a framework, including new standards, and then put the curriculum on review as is required by education law for the public. In this case, we are taking a different approach. We've heard you, our board and our superintendent have directed the staff across divisions here in education services, as well as in business and in HR, to begin to look at the implementation or consideration of these new laws specific to ethnic studies to carefully consider local priorities while also engaging high school and middle school students and teachers interested as part of the process. With that said, I can pause here for comments or questions.
I have a question. We've heard several times that this process is beginning early. Does it mean that if the plans are completed, that GUSD will plan to start the course early?
Great question. It could.
It could happen that the teachers, the community with their input, the students express interest through course selection and decide that they want to register for a course in ethnic studies as an elective, just as they could any of the other electives on the high school campus. That would, while I always want to do what our students want to do as quickly as we can with the good discernment of the staff we support, I would not anticipate being ready for anything like that in the next school year. If things go really well in terms of teacher committees having time to work together to get a curriculum in place that is reviewed by the community, could a pilot be ready as early as fall of 2023? I suppose that it could. And if we had 35 high school students who wanted to take that course and a teacher who felt prepared to teach it and had the professional credential to allow them to teach that, we certainly could. I would comfort everyone on this call who is going, wow, that's awfully soon, because I know some of our teachers on this call might feel that that's an obligation or direction of them by me. It is not that. It is merely an openness to what the community may want at this time that we're only beginning to learn. Thank you for asking. I heard Mrs. Merkley had also a comment or question.
I did. I really just wanted to reiterate that we are going above and beyond what is required. Because as I was looking through the model curriculum, there were little things, you know, it looked like it'd take maybe a year. And we are really having the community having a lot of input. And I appreciate your staff doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So in the model curriculum standards, some highlights briefly. If you would advance the slides, what is the purpose of an ethnic studies course? And in listening to some of the public comment this evening and in previous board meetings, there is a real responsibility to acknowledge the complexity of what is happening on the local, state, and national level in terms of conversations about what happens in classrooms. And with that acknowledgement, I thought it best to quote contents from that Instructional Quality Commission, as well as how the document stands. An ethnic studies course is meant to cultivate empathy, as you can see, self-determination, and the well-being of all participants. That includes not only students who might not have found themselves represented in the traditional teaching of United States history, but also students who are looking for potentially hearing more of the stories of people who look like them more, and considering what that means to them in terms of the home values that their family has instilled in them. We are obligated to do that objectively and professionally. It is also meant, an ethnic studies course, to celebrate and honor all people by providing a space to share stories of success, community collaboration, and intellectual and cultural wealth. So with the purpose of ethnic studies clearly in mind, The next slide is one that the community saw before. Thank you. When we talked about the grad requirement, we're good. Thank you. Wanted to just bring it back to the top. It is intended to build greater understanding and communication. It is also intended to reveal underlying commonalities. And I am very aware of the accountabilities of doing this work with our community committee, with our staff, with the students. And that is something on behalf of our team that we take very, very seriously. I will pause and see if there are questions from the trustees or comments representing our community. Hearing none. This body is aware that we will have 6 committees considering the implementation of AB 101. There will be 2 teacher committees, one in history, social science, one in English language arts. That is significant as we look at the local options that AB 101 has provided our district in terms of where the course might fit to serve the needs of Glendora families and students. We have the community committee, which we've spoken about briefly. A number of the people who've applied to be on that committee are on this call. I thank them for already engaging and welcome further engagement from them beginning actually Wednesday evening when we will start the interview process. We're also looking to talk with high school and middle school students about the curriculum and their experience locally, as well as because currently I heard one of our public commenters ask about funding and the expenditures involved. In many schools where an ethnic studies curriculum has been brought on board, if you will, most of the curriculum is available as part of public documents that are online and completely free through open sourcing. We need our partners in higher education, not from a particular university or college, community college, whatever it might be, but across various universities, colleges, to provide us information about those historical and other primary source documents, many of which I had the pleasure of learning more about and reviewing the entirety of the model curriculum standards to prepare for you this evening. We also will be strongly committed in each of these committees to serving the unique and specific needs of our local population. With that said, I will pause after the next slide.
I just have a quick question, Dr. Kelson.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Mrs.
On
Ruder.
the previous slide, you talk about the teachers from history, social science, I don't remember the correct language arts. Is that at all levels or only at secondary as far as those teachers are concerned?
Great question. We would welcome participation from teachers who are interested in participating. I have heard from some teachers in elementary and middle schools who are interested because there are social studies courses, there are, components of the language arts standards that look at even just the research skills that we're training students to have, or the critical thinking skills that have been a longstanding part of a well-rounded education. So at this point, we would open it up to teachers who are interested from any level. And we want to keep the groups between 10 and 15 participants so that we can be productive. However, I anticipate that even if a teacher isn't on one of the working groups or committees, that they will continue to be part of this process through presentations in their staff meetings, through some of our teachers are on this call this evening. They're always welcome in board meetings. However, it really, Trustee Ruder, short answer, it will depend on a teacher's time in their day and interest or willingness in participating. We have science curriculum to finish adopting. We have a ton of other initiatives that are part of a Teacher's Day, but we will welcome participation from people who are interested, would be our general stance.
Hi,
If I
sorry. I tried to unmute myself because I
My
had a question on the last slide. Is it possible to reference the previous slide before this? Hi, sorry. I had a question regarding one of the previous slides. Is it possible to go?
He's muting her.
I just had a question as in regards, and this is going to take it off the topic of the committees per se. But I have had community members that are interested in understanding that while this is a graduation requirement, and the reason I asked about the primary teachers was if some of these philosophies and some of these ethnic studies, how do I say this, the lessons plans, et cetera, can be brought down into the primary levels or can be taught through the social studies as it comes through elementary and middle schools and not necessarily just the graduation requirement class.
Thank you for that.
So
So right
now-
now, in the approximately 500 pages of course outlines that are part of the model curriculum standards, everyone is presented at the high school level. They are connected in some cases to standards that are taught in the elementary grades. And I'll give a good example. In order for a student to understand a standard in world history or in American government, they probably need to have knowledge of geography, at least in terms of what the continents are and where North America is in relationship to the other continents in the world. That is a long-standing social studies topic taught in the early primary grades. So for now, Trustee Reuter, I would simply say that I would recommend that we begin the conversation aiming for a high school course as part of our implementation. And if we have teachers in the middle, elementary, or preschool level who want to consider the standards in their curriculum, which is adopted by the state of California, to align with what is taught at the high school, that would be a topic for the future. First, I believe we have to go ahead and look at what is required of our high school students in the near future. Dr. De Leon, something to add? I'm going to mute.
When you come to the end of your slide, are you?
Mhm.
Yeah, I noticed that on this particular slide, Dr. Kelson, that you do have a section that is quoted from the model curriculum standards. And you also had some quotes on previous slides. Are we to understand that when you're quoting from the model curriculum standards? I just want to make sure that we know which documents we're referencing when folks see quotes throughout.
Yes, thank you. Unless something is called out as a board policy or in the case of the handout referencing curriculum selection from 1976. Yes, these quotes are directly from the model curriculum standards, and thank you for that opportunity to offer that.
So yes,
My question pertains to the 6 different committees.
yes.
It seems like a lot of different committees where they could benefit from each other's knowledge. The community could benefit from hearing from teachers, and students could, or the teachers could benefit from hearing from students and the community as well. Is there going to be a time when the groups will be together? Are these subcommittees of the larger committee, or how will they get to share their information and their concerns, their ideas, their perspectives?
Yes, thank you for that.
So the website, the district website will have on the news and events, for those of you who've joined us since this presentation began, we'll have folders by date with materials or notes that the committees use as part of their discussion. I would like to humbly say that the notes may be brief, as I will probably be one of a few common participants across committees, even just to see to it that there are connections made. On the community committee, though I will not be a voting member. With that said, should the board ask for updates on what the teacher committees are doing or what the student committees are discussing, in addition to what is shared in our meetings with principals or various teacher meetings that happen in a normal year, certainly we would be providing those updates very, very transparently.
So is there a time when they're going to be collaborating together?
I suppose
There could be, sure. We haven't designed it all to the full extent yet, but I could see where the community committee or one or both of the teacher committees might want to hear from a student who, or a couple of students who prepare a presentation on their perspective and what they hope to see, sort of a summit about what students have learned. Or what our teachers have learned that they want to echo to our students, or questions from the community committee, that those are echoed to the teachers and to the students. And maybe, I know our community committee are all volunteering their time, but I would envision maybe a member of the community committee being able to come and talk with the high school students, or one of the teacher committees to stay engaged in the process. So it could be overwhelming to think about all of that socializing and interaction as we come back together. And yet I think that is absolutely paramount. It's also going to help with trust. And I would say that's important.
So, and if I may, just one personal comment here, I think there's so much to be learned from each of these groups to share with the other groups to understand. It's almost like it's their own little microcosm of ethnicities here. You know, we have the ethnicity of the history, social science teachers, the ethnicity of middle school students, that we can build some understanding amongst these groups of why they feel the way they feel. So I think the collaboration piece, in my opinion, is really valuable.
Thank you. Thank you. I also would offer briefly, as we go to the slide on what is ethnic studies, it's one or two after this one, that that feedback process and the transparency are part of honoring the local priorities and the perspectives there, right? In order to teach students to engage in the community, we need strong adult role models from their homes, from various aspects, you know, pockets of groups in our community, to be able to show students how adults do this work and continue to honor the traditions that are important to them. So with that said, a number of public commenters, and in preparation for this evening, it's important to acknowledge some perceptions, and this could in fact be the most potentially controversial part of this evening's presentation. So I will do my very best to honor multiple perspectives. With that said, some constituents believe that critical race theory, as it is officially called, or potentially not officially called, is taught in our Glendora Unified classrooms. I would like to suggest that while there is some press and conversation in some circles about that possibility, our teams are going to stay with the technical definition of critical race theory. which if the committee is interested, there will be posted a handout of educational terminology tomorrow by 4 p.m. Trustees, it's called handout 5. And therein is a definition of the technical term critical race theory. It is traditionally used in legal scholarship, and many of you will remember the On the Minds of Many document that attempted to define the difference between ethnic studies and critical race theory. There are some important things that have come about, and I believe that these ideas lend to some of our community members' perspectives. And that has to do with in the model curriculum standards, there are some districts, not Glendora Unified. We don't have a published ethnic studies course outline. There are some school districts who are in fact going to use a critical race perspective as part of their conversations in their local implementation of the ethnic studies curriculum. As it says here on this slide, that is not planned for any of the committees that will be part of Glendora Unified's work in implementing AB 130. So with that said, sure, I will briefly share some information that is in the educational terminology in terms of how terms are commonly used in K-12 education. This handout will, by the way, have a list of sources cited, which include not only some dictionary type definitions, but also some definitions from various peer-reviewed research sources and some others. So briefly, from the UCLA School of Law, School of Public Affairs from 2021, critical race theory was developed, and this is a direct quote, critical race theory was developed out of legal scholarship. It provides a critical analysis of race and racism from a legal point of view. Since its inception within legal scholarship, CRT has spread to many disciplines. CRT has basic tenets that guide its framework. These tenets are interdisciplinary and can be approached from different branches of learning. It goes on to say in the middle of the second paragraph, CRT identifies that there are existing power structures that are based on, and please forgive me for those of you for whom this term is offensive, white privilege and white supremacy, which perpetuates the marginalization of people of color. There are, and the definition is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs long. It quotes the work of 2 scholars, Bell and Freeman, who seem to have begun the conversation or defined the term critical race theory. I believe they are out of Harvard. There is also a scholar and a conference named from the state of Wisconsin. So I wanted to acknowledge that request for information about critical race theory, knowing that we serve many populations and people with multiple perspectives in this public school district. With that said,
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Sorry,
No, thank you. It's a good
So
time.
the handout that you're referring to is with the definitions. I certainly am not going to ask you to go through all of them. It's quite a lengthy handout. But I do want to clarify for the group that these are, there are a lot of definitions floating around about a lot of different words, depending on where you're getting your information, where you're getting your sources. And you've sourced all of the material and all of the definitions that are in that handout. And I just want to make sure that I understand that moving forward, that those definitions are the framework that we will be using, or that the Glendora Unified School District, that those are the terms and the definitions of those terms that we will be going forth with, if I'm explaining myself correctly, that our intentions are transparent, that those are the definitions, and we will use those words the way they are defined in this document.
Thank you for clarifying that. That is correct. I think it's important to highlight some examples. There are, and I don't mind reading the terms that are defined. Critical race theory, culturally responsive teaching, and that's a citation back from 2002. Discrimination, disparate outcomes, diversity, equity, identity, inclusion, inclusive, inequity, microaggression, multicultural competence, 5 more: narrative, normative, perception, prejudice, and social justice. Many of the terms listed here were sent to us by one of our constituents who has asked us to be mindfully aware of the potential impact of the terminology. So as you've asked us, Trustee Reuter, the accountability for the committees as they meet will be to refer to these terms. They will be part of early meetings of each of the committees to ensure that we are respecting the work of our community and the traditions and values here. So we wanted to provide what is our operational definition of each of these in K-12 education. A good example, when we think about the word inclusion, that could be problematic for some. However, when you go back to the 1970s and you think about how athletics for women were not funded because there was not law that mandated that. When we in K-12 education include students who are male, students who are female in athletics, we are following the legal mandate to do that. It's difficult for my team to think about an educational system that would have to go away from talking about the significance of providing those opportunities. A second example, wanting our children who graduate from this district, which is my focus specifically, but in reality, I would hope this and work toward it for all children in the United States, that our children would have an economically viable future, ripe with opportunities and having the skills they need to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue. In order to do that, we have to talk about how our work day in, day out connects students with advantages as a result of attending this district in order to attain that economically viable future. So 2 examples of why these terms and a reasonable definition of them, at least as a starting space, is here. I do need to say, for those of you who are eager to participate as part of the community, that the community committee will be taking a look at these terms. We have not discussed these with anyone in the community on a broad scale yet, but they will be posted on the website and certainly part of our ongoing conversation and dialogue. With that said, I've covered the next slide, Kellen. I can pause for a moment if there are questions or comments from the trustees. Hearing none. So what is required of school districts and specifically of Glendora Unified as we move forward? Again, these mandates are quoted from the model curriculum. We must, this is a kind of a beginning of a recap and looking at next steps. We must include ethnic studies as either a standalone elective or as part of, as you've heard, history or social science and, or English language arts. My prediction, having worked in education for a while, is that the state letting districts decide involves not only what is realistic for them economically. Many school districts have various graduation requirements above and beyond those set by the State Board of Education. And it will be up to teachers, the students, and the community committee with their input to influence how Glendora Unified adopts these mandates. The course must be written in a way that includes multiple users. Again, this is a shall, not a may. We are mandated to get input from the community, from the students we serve, from the teachers. We must reflect pupil demographics in the community, and that's part of why those census stats were there. And we must include, according to the law, the voices of local indigenous populations in planning courses. Another important reason to have our local partners in the Historical Society and others who can help us consider that mandate in the law. Why ethnic studies beyond these legal mandates? I mentioned to you that we are committed to seeing to it that Glendora has a highly skilled workforce that of adults who can choose their occupation and express their true purpose in a way that inspires them. We want to be certain that we maintain connections to the local community, that our parents and families who continue to be such a vital part of influencing the work of this district have the opportunity to do that. And realistically, that our students have greater advantages to attain what it is they need to attain to thrive as adults. Ethnic studies research, though relatively young in terms of its application in K-12 education, has shown some improvements in academic outcomes for all students. That includes an increase in those things listed on the slide: attendance, graduation rates, improved problem solving and critical thinking skills, and academic motivation. As the committees get together to read the model curriculum standards, there is quite a bit of research and inquiry-based learning for students, teaching them how to interview leaders in the community, their own families, looking at multiple historical documents, filtering with their own background and experiences to make sense of what it is and they see in the community and in the global society around them. So what are our responsibilities as district staff? We will keep the board and the community updated on our progress. We will define ethnic studies locally. We will ensure that resources such as time and primary source documents are available. And right now, our educators would tell you that time is at a premium. We will also ensure that our staff is consistently professional when approaching the teaching of any controversial topic, and that we honor the requests of our families as they relate to individual students or children. That's that acknowledgement of the parents' rights document in Board Policy 5020 and the related regulations. We will also support and involve our teachers as they begin to explore the model curriculum standards. I will pause for comments or questions from the trustees representing our community.
I guess I'd say that as it pertains to your first bullet point and a point that Trustee Borg mentioned earlier in regards to the collaboration between the committees, et cetera, and the potential for updates from those committees that I certainly as a board member would like to see whatever the appropriately agreed upon updates would be from those committees doing that work, just because it's I'm interested, and it seems that the community is interested as well. And I'm not asking you to define what that regularly scheduled interval is right here and now, but as you get the ball rolling, maybe you could give us an update on what would be appropriate that way. But I personally would be interested.
Thank you. That is duly noted. And once we complete the presentation and interview process, which we aim to do again, starting Wednesday and then finishing in 2022, early 2022, January is my ultimate goal. I will get the rest of the presentations and interviews scheduled when the community, when the selection panel gets together with all of their calendars on Wednesday. I'll be happy to update the trustees very soon after that with what those dates are. And then certainly, yes, we can honor that request by keeping our community updated. Are there other comments or questions from the trustees? So what are the next steps? I mentioned that interviews begin this week and will continue. I would like to get the presentations and interviews done in the month of January. However, I would like to say we will complete those by the end of February, just to ensure that we deliver what we promise. We will be televising the presentations as part of an unmonitored Zoom link, and each community committee applicant has been advised that may occur. When I reach back out to them after this evening, I will tell them that in fact, that is going to occur. Student committees and teacher committees, as mentioned previously, are slated to begin in the summer or fall of 2022. And we are committed to, as requested and directed, to ensuring that the process is transparent. After these materials are posted in the file under news and events on the district website, I will include there my contact information for anybody who would like to reach out, set up a time to talk, set up a time to go over something after you've seen the handouts, you want to ask or talk about anything. Our team and I specifically am here to serve the local interests while upholding the mandates of state law and board policy as we go forward to serve the best interest of all of the children in this school district. So that concludes the formal aspects of this presentation. I welcome comments or questions from our trustees.
Am I the only one? I just wanted to give a little bit of my own personal perspective as far as ethnic studies is concerned. So far, I've read the preface, the first chapter, the second chapter, and I've done a, let's say, deep skim on the fourth chapter, which are the lesson plans. It's a lot. It's thousands of pages. So I'll just own up to that's what I've read so far. And it's extremely comprehensive. It's extremely thorough, and the state has done, I think, a really great job laying out what their expectations are for this. And I just wanted to say, you know, I've had a couple people in the community ask me my personal feelings on this, so I think it's fair. This is the study session. I asked for it, so I don't know who knows this about me, but I think I've lived in maybe 11 states growing up. I studied abroad in Spain in college. And when our kids were 2 and 3, we moved over to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates for 5 years. And my life has been dramatically enriched by all of those experiences, being in Sevilla, Spain for the Feria at Easter time, being in Abu Dhabi during Ramadan, and being invited over to other people's houses for iftar to break the fast. we were there during the Arab Spring. We were in Abu Dhabi during the Arab Spring. So to get the perspective of the Middle East and members of our community while we were there versus what we may have heard while we were in America and listening to American news or talking to other Americans were two, I'm guessing, completely different things. And so when I look at ethnic studies and when I read the curriculum, that's what I'm excited about for our students. I'm excited for our students who are of different cultures and nationalities and religions to have a platform where they will be able to be excited and tell their classmates who they are and where they're from and what their traditions are. And I'm excited for my kids or kids in general to learn about those other cultures and traditions that way. Will controversial topics come up? Yeah, I'm sure that they will. I'm sure that they already do. You know, kids are curious and inquisitive, and it's all part of what we here in Glendora teach them as far as critical thinking is concerned. I feel strongly about teachers receiving the appropriate professional development so that they know how to manage those conversations, so that they, if things do start to get controversial or confrontational, that our teachers know how to help manage those situations and talk kids through how to respectfully navigate those kinds of conversations. But going back to your very first slide, I think I do trust our teachers. I do trust our teachers to handle this in the appropriate way. And I look forward to and have been a big proponent of the community's involvement, the teachers' involvement, the students' involvement makes me super excited. So I thank you for this opportunity to hear about the process. I understand that it might not be exactly what everybody on this call was looking for. I do think that we'll give people certainly the opportunity to send emails in for any sort of follow-up specific questions that they might have. And I thank you and I'm sure your staff for putting all the effort into not only this presentation, but all the supporting documents.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I would like to echo Ms. Reuter's comments to the T. And I would encourage everyone, community, teachers, students even, please take the time to look at the curriculum. I know it's lots of pages. You don't have to read it verbatim. You can skim over I would encourage you to read the preface, chapters 1, 2, look it over, but skim over. There's hundreds of lesson plans. There are tens of unit plans. There's probably, I'm going to say, 3,000 to 5,000 pages in.
I have it right here.
Yeah, it's a 3-inch notebook binder that I'm sitting next to here. Please take the time to read over some of this and find out what it's really all about. Then evaluate it. I'm asking now for the district to put the links to all of this, just the same thing we all got earlier. Please include that in your webpage on it's going to be on the front page of the district website. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
It's going to be easy for you to find. Again, take the time. I know you've taken the interest here. Please take the time and go look at it and read it with an open mind. Anybody else, any other board members, something to say?
Zandra, if I could. Can you hear me
Yes.
okay? Okay. Dr. Kelson, I just want to thank you for your comprehensive presentation. Really appreciated all of the different contours of the presentation that I think clearly articulated the various elements of how we're going to go about planning for implementing and enacting the ethnic studies curriculum. I also really appreciate the way that you differentiated clearly and with clarity some of the concerns related to critical race theory and ethnic studies. And I think one of the key things that's missing in today's world is that people do not read. People tend to scroll, they tend to click, but they don't tend to read. And I'm just going to encourage the public to actually read the documents that have been provided by the California Department of Education. They are comprehensive. They are actually well done. I think there is a good element and stream of local control that is embedded into this curriculum development. And I think the district has done an excellent job of engaging the community to create this community committee that I believe and I hope will represent a diverse array of opinions that are already expressed in Glendora, those that have not been expressed on this Zoom call, but are also very present based on my conversations with families in Glendora who are excited about this potential curriculum development in our community. But I think this level of diversity of opinion is good. It is part of democracy. And I hope that we can move in that process with civility as opposed to with combativeness. But I think this is part of why we live in this country, where we can have an education process where heard but also unheard voices are brought to the center. And that so we can broaden our understandings of history, of identity, of people's realities that people experience, not only in our community, but in communities elsewhere. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Mrs. Borg,
Yes.
I just wanted to add my gratitude to Dr. Kelson and Dr. De Leon and everyone that worked on this. It was very thorough, very detailed, very high level, very educational. I appreciate it very much. It's very thoughtful the way that you went through everything and broke it down, dividing up and linking us to additional information and resources that us as board members can continue to use to educate ourselves, and the community can join us in doing that. Yes, this is, a very sensitive topic, and one that can't, like many topics we teach in our schools, can go very well and be very enriching for our students, and can, frankly, go badly and be taught wrong. But like Mrs. Reuter said, I trust our teachers to do the right job. I trust them to handle and navigate sensitive topics like this and many others that we've been teaching for years, that they have successfully navigated appropriately for years, to do it right with the right professional development. The thoughtfulness and extent to which you're going into detail here is very much appreciated. We just got back from California School Boards Association annual conference. I don't know of many districts, if any, that are going to this level of depth in terms of their efforts to be transparent, informative, and engage board members and the public far beyond what's required of us to do it. I thank you for that. I know that the petition of folks that were very concerned about it was only 1,500, which is less than 5% of the over 37,000 people that we represent, and that this call never got over 75. But we say that every voice matters, right? Every constituent voice, every employee voice, every student voice matters. And this workshop and all of the efforts that your team is putting into this really demonstrates that. So thank you. Please continue that. I really look forward to receiving updates on all of the committees and all of their extensive work that needs to be done, appropriately extensive on a topic like this. And I have every confidence that at the end of this, Glendora Unified is going to have curriculum and textbooks that are very appropriate and very enriching to the educational program that we offer in Glendora Unified. So thank you very much for all of that.
Ms. Borg, I'd like to say something too. First, I really want to thank those who applied to be on this committee. It was a lot of work. I mean, I don't know all of the extent, but I know they had to write an essay, and it was extensive. So all of those who applied, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We will appreciate your input. We are looking forward to that. Dr. Kelson, I did have one question. You said it was going to be in February. I thought we would be able to choose, the committee would be chosen this week. Is it?
Thank you. initially thought that we could get everything done before break.
Mhm.
However, we have 7 adult schedules to match in the selection panel and 29 applicants, thereabouts. I might be off by 1 in terms of the number, or 2 in terms of the number of applicants. And as I humbly tried to coordinate those interests, which are wonderful to have, we've had to extend the time involved slightly. So you have my commitment that we will get it done as expediently as we can. And yet it is the holiday season. So briefly, what we will do, we have an alphabetical list of everyone who applied. The first half of the alphabet will, for the most part, be interviewing this interviewing this Wednesday. The second half, or anyone who wrote back and said, I cannot be there at the time you've given me, and it was all randomly assigned in a very sequential, transparent manner, those folks will be invited back as soon as the selection panelists can find a common block of 4 to 5 hours of time. So I wanted to get it done more quickly to begin the process of widely engaging our community. And it will be done quickly. It's just going to take a little extra time. I think December is a busy month for many, many families, and I honor that. So
I just was curious, what is expected in the presentations?
Thank you. So the first part involves a recap of one of the research studies. It's an article about a program that Stanford researched that was part of the application essay, and a highlight of the California Department of Education's webpage about the curriculum and AB 101. So it's maybe 1,000 words of reading from CDE, and the article from Stanford where somebody to print it is no more than 2,000 words. So we're asking that people prepare a presentation on those 2 texts, giving an overview of a basic introductory knowledge of ethnic studies in a minimum of 4 minutes and a maximum of 5 minutes. There will be a transparent timing process similar to the one used in our presentations or our public comment this evening. Somebody will be holding up a sign and giving people a 1-minute warning. And the same rubric covering not only content, key aspects of both of those, the Stanford and CDE article, as well as, did the person stay within the time limit? Simple things will be a part of the rubric. And when the Zoom link is prepared and posted, it will be on that news and events page, along with a commonplace someone is going to tell the community about in terms of submitting questions or comments on the process. People will see that that is what's happening as part of this first round. If we have need to host a second round of interviews, then we will develop questions on 2 of the chapters of the actual model curriculum. It's quite a bit of reading. So some folks would say it's good that that part isn't required of them until January or early February. And if we decide that when the selection panel talks this Wednesday, I anticipate being able to pin down the dates for that second portion as well, so that we can plan ahead and get it done. You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
Mrs. Borg, can I have another question, if I may?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This is sort of long-term thoughts here, Dr. Kelson. I wondered if, as you've read through all of the curriculum, if there are options related to experiential learning. So things like a civil rights tour, things that can be done in the summer where high school students can experience what they're learning in the classroom to this ethnic studies curriculum, that they can go, just like we have taken students to, Europe and other places. If that is something that might be an option for us as a value add for our students. I know many colleges and universities do civil rights tours. They're tremendous life-changing events. They give a different picture to those students about our country. So just a thought in terms of, as we move forward, if there's any ways to embed experiential learning, I think that would be something that would be a positive thing. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Dr. Fernando. The inquiry-based approach that the standards require us to implement will allow for students to consider questions that are meaningful to them and to look into them as they relate to local history and to honoring their backgrounds as well as the backgrounds of others. So certainly I could see where some teachers may want to incorporate experiences of all kinds into the curriculum. And I, knowing a few of the people who have reached out to us, there's a ton of local history that impacts the potential for this course that I hope students will be inspired to learn more of. So yes, I believe we can explore all of those possibilities with the committees as they work together.
Anything else, board members? I would just like to add one thing that all of us have tried to represent the community tonight by asking questions. And if the community has other questions that we did not address, we are going to make available the bmpc@glendora.k12.ca.us email as a way for you to submit some questions. And hopefully there'll be questions that can't be answered by looking at the website and the presentation. But if you have other questions that you didn't feel got asked tonight, I'll repeat it again. bmpc@glendora.k12.ca.us. And I too would like to add my thanks to Dr. Kelson and her staff. I think she's ready for a gallon of water after all that talking. It was very well done. I think you added the pertinent information on a very touchy subject, but it is all factual, and I'm grateful for that because I've been in the community and I've heard so much misinformation about so many things that the facts are so valuable to all of us. Thank you again. Appreciate your time tonight. And I'm going to move on to the adjournment. Tonight, I have the sad news of announcing that I had received word over the weekend of the passing of Katie Mendoza. And I'm going to ask Dr. Garcia to just give a little background of Katie, who was a teacher and the president of the GTA Association.
Thank you so much, President Board. Yes, Miss Katie Mendoza unfortunately passed away this past Thursday. She'd only been retired 3 years from our district. She worked for our district for more than 25 years, retiring in 2018. She was a teacher at La Fecha for all of her years of service to Glendora Unified. She was a stalwart there and started the La Fecha Foundation, as well as the PTA at La Fecha as a parent when she first came to the school, as a parent and then a teacher. She, of course, was a GTA leader, their executive board member, and for several of her last years, the GTA president. So she was an esteemed colleague and a dedicated individual to the district. She'll be greatly missed, and we give her thoughts to her family.
So in memory of Katie Mendoza, I would like to adjourn the meeting tonight. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Merkley, seconded by Dr. Fernando. Let me call out the roll call. Mrs. Merkley, all those in favor?
Aye.
Dr. Fernando?
Aye.
Mr. Ellenson?
Aye.
Mrs. Reuter?
Aye.
And my vote is aye also. The meeting is adjourned at 8:26 p.m. Thank you all.